Okay, hi. So I have a lot to say, but like I have my notes here. So most of the time my head will probably be facing this way instead of like this. So I hope that doesn't bother anyone. But like the first thing I want to talk about is that how all members, like former members, current members, are just like on one big cultural spectrum, whether they like it or not, whether we like it or not. And I think that the environment that we've had has had an effect on us. I think some of us have been able to strip away a lot of these layers, but I still think there are just like some layers that are kind of just ingrained in our personality because, these are our experiences. Again, that depends on the person because not everyone has been in it for the same amount of time, or like not everyone has been in it mentally as different levels of depth as well. So I got to the point, like for myself, where I was trying to like deny the Jehovah's Witness influence on my life, like in my personality, and I realized it would kind of be like denying the influence that African American culture has had on me, because it is what it is, and it's just Jehovah's Witnesses are just one of the many influences that have shaped me, and even like the fact that I've been living in Albania for like 5 years, that has had an effect on me as well. And so here's like my disclaimer, is that when I'm talking now, I'm probably gonna be using generalizations. And when I talk about former members, I'm specifically speaking about people who haven't been gone for too long. It's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years or less. And for the active members, I'm talking about those who are like really active, doing their best. Same way like I was, full on drinking all the Kool-Aid, like these type of people, like this. So the main thing that everyone agrees with is that they all try to be a good person. This is like across the whole spectrum of Jehovah's Witnesses. Generally, everyone wants to be a good person. And this is nothing unique to them because everyone in every religion wants to be a good person, because otherwise you wouldn't really join a church. But the Jehovah's Witnesses have a very interesting approach to being a good person. So for active Jehovah's Witnesses, they use the Bible and their Watchtower publications as their moral code book. They would like to believe that they just use the Bible, but they don't, because otherwise there'd be no need for magazines. But they will try to argue and say that, God communicates with the Watchtower magazines or the Awake or any other publications, because that's sometimes where like the new understanding comes from. But, just like every other religion, they cherry pick, and it's completely normal to cherry pick because we're humans. We do this constant. We're always cherry picking. Like it's just what we do. But I just want to like establish this first, that their sense of morality is not based on logic or emotion, but typically based on doctrine, which is always a huge red flag. So anyway, so if like a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, from what I've noticed, is that their common sense or their morality stems from like common sense or like science sometimes, or like their newfound religion or spirituality or whatever they want to base it on to become a good person. So if you take like both of these groups who are very, very, very similar, you can also see why sometimes they clash because Jehovah's Witnesses will look at a former member, and the way they'll see them is they'll see them as lost, misled, the A word, which I'm just going to replace with the word whistleblower, because that's essentially what it is. It's just whistleblowing. They'll view you as being discouraged, evil, disrespectful to the organization or to God, this, that, and a third. Now, on the other end, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses or former members, they look at Jehovah's Witnesses with a lot more diversity because they've been on both sides of the fence. So they can see the narcissism. They can see how sometimes you're disassociating from your experiences. They can see the kindness. They can see the volunteer spirit. They can see the desire to do good. They can see the prejudice. They can see the nepotism. They can see a lot of this. So like their awareness of the they're more aware, I would say. So here's my realization, and I'll also like explain it as well. So I realized that the culture survives on creating an enemy, and this is what happens on both ends of the same cultural spectrum. So for a lot of active witnesses who are full like believers, they automatically see former members as no longer being approved or acceptable or part of their group in a way that makes them different. So like these former members are now, there is an amount of distance between an active witness and this other person here. You don't see each other as being the same, in God's eyes, doing the same amount of like effort. It's just now you're different. And so for people who have left, there are also a variety of feelings. And I would say that every member probably has, some sort of religious trauma, and a lot of us trauma bond, which is normal as well. But anyway, I just want to point out how even with former witnesses, the mentality of us versus them continues. Because if you look at Jehovah's Witnesses, they teach that there are two main groups. The first is, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the second group is everyone else that doesn't fall into that category. And this teaching is very, very, very deeply ingrained. Because as former members leave, they start to like, mentally transition and realize that, they used to be a Jehovah's Witness, but now they're kind of joining the world. And again, this isn't for everyone, but this is just, my observation and my experience of how it went from, okay, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, this is the world. Now I'm kind of, taking a step back from their religion, and you kind of automatically view yourself as, being a part of something different, or the world. And I felt like I would never fit in with the rest of society or the world because, my life experience is just being so different. And then I realized how like JW adjacent that thought was in itself, because, you have a bunch of Muslims that were raised differently from me. You have a bunch of cults in America, very different. You have Jewish communities. You have people who have grown up trans. You have adopted kids. You have Mormons. You have divorced families. You have all this variety. And so I had to realize that there was no us versus them, and that I was carrying this mentality from the Jehovah's Witness organization into my, let's say, my newfound freedom. And so like the religion makes you think you're special because when you're in it, you have the truth. And I noticed this attitude can carry over because it makes your circumstances feel very special. And even though, yes, I would say that being raised a Jehovah's Witness is a very particular experience, but it's not that we have unique aspects that cannot be found in other groups, or that we don't have any shared experiences with others. Especially when they're like, religious groups around the world that have, similar teachings. I remember seeing some online that also have 1914, that also go door to door, that also enforce shunning, that also have, even crazier rules than what we had. So again, like, this is just my opinion, but I've seen a lot of people, including myself, like kind of use their pain to prove that their experience as a Jehovah's Witness was vastly different from the world. And I think it's because they see the religion as, they see the Jehovah's Witnesses as something that should, in theory, be good, but they aren't realizing that, things that happen in the world are also happening in kingdom halls. I'm gonna say that again, that everything that happens outside of a kingdom hall also happens inside of a kingdom hall. That is like, that was like a realization that I had to have for myself, and that there aren't special experiences that we have that are unique to the human experience. Let me just put it like that. What else was I gonna say? I want to say that also that I don't know, that the point that I'm trying to make is that religion isn't a safe haven or something special. And the moment we realize that their religion is just like any other religion, and that we shouldn't have high expectations from people, that it can help us, kind of see current members and ourselves in a different light. And I know that there's some members, some like former members, and again, I'm just talking like about like a minority group. Like there are some of them that are like really, really hateful towards Jehovah's Witnesses because again, they've had terrible experiences, and I don't want to downplay anyone's experiences because there are a lot of people who have gone through child sexual abuse, not being able to get divorced and like leave, abusive marriages, being mistreated by their parents, being emotionally abused by their parents as well. Like there's so many reasons I can understand why someone would become hateful, like hate individual members, because some experiences are just so extreme, and I don't want to downplay that. But then there are also some people who blame the organization, which I can also understand, but it gets a little bit weird for me when they start to hate members or, blame Jehovah's Witnesses as a whole, and especially people who they've never met. And the type of people I'm talking about are the ones specifically that like will harass witnesses when they're doing the carts, will like vandalize their churches with graffiti or fires, or like blowing up their doors like they did in Italy recently, who will interrupt their meetings or interrupt their Zoom meetings, which kind of, accelerates the persecution complex that they already have. And I mean, it's clear that these people who are doing these things are obviously hurt. But like when you have high expectations, you can get let down easily. I'm just gonna say it like that. And they have high expectations for a religion that is full of uneducated volunteers. And honestly, if there was like an international organization like with mostly uneducated volunteers, I don't really know if it's right to be mad at a group of a whole bunch of people that are uneducated and they're also being, manipulated themselves. Even though they can't see it, they're all being used. So on the flip side for Jehovah's Witnesses, there are some hate for former members as well, because let's say if you're an active Jehovah's Witness and someone has left, the different emotions that I've seen people feel is that sometimes they feel scared, sometimes they feel uncomfortable being around them. And again, this is not, every Jehovah's Witness. It's just a specific set of them that feel this way. Some of them get really angry. I had one person come to my house and curse me, like literally curse me out when I told them that the numbers for the prophecies didn't add up. And I was still an active member at this point. So like it changes, but again, we're humans, right? So like the Jehovah's Witnesses start to see the former members as being different from them, because when they see someone who is not serving God, they can already kind of clock that God approves of them more than the other person. So now you have like this I would call it like a dangerous combination of feeling superior, but also feeling like, you are the person being supported by God. And I'm going to add to this ignorance. And I'm going to say sometimes it's willful. I'm going to add willful ignorance to the equation, because like a lot of the time, they're never interested as to why a person has left. And they go through a lot of emotions and mental gymnastics when this type of things occurs, to validate their own beliefs and experiences. And it's because like they're trained not to investigate things that need to be investigated. And that's one thing I would say that makes XJWs a bit different, is that they tend to investigate things more. And for me, this is where the culture probably, is drastically divided in like how they do research and how they kind of accept information. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that the Jehovah's Witnesses are not a monolith, and that there's a lot of diversity in how people serve, how intense they serve. But when you're in it, you're normally trying to do your best, and like you have the people around you that you can kind of use to like measure your progress. So when someone is doing less than you, you kind of start to see them differently. Because again, that mentality of the us versus them continues even within the organization, because now you have like witnesses and you have the world, but even within like this group, you have, okay, those who are viewed as spiritually weak and those who are viewed as spiritually strong. And there's just so many layers to the us versus them mentality. It's like, okay, spiritually weak, this is like anyone who's interested but not doing their best. People who are doing the best, but you personally don't think they're doing enough. People who have the potential to do more and are not taking this, people who have been disciplined, and then your spiritually strong people, you might view them as your elders, people with a position of power typically, or people who have devoted the most time essentially, because the only way you can really gauge a person's spirituality is based on activities. So how much time you devote is basically what it's saying. And I guess we'll go up from there to like your anointed, your governing body who's appointed by God, like all these, there's a lot of levels of division within the organization that sometimes when we leave, we kind of carry this mentality just a little bit over into our regular lives. I went off on a tangent, sorry. Let me go back to my script. The thing I want to point out is that the former members, the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses or inactive Jehovah's Witnesses, they aren't a monolith either, come in all shapes, sizes. And I would say that everyone is at a different point of growth when it comes to their healing journey, because, that's where we're all on. Even some people, even Jehovah's Witnesses that are in there, they're on their healing journey as well. And I think it's probably a reason why some people could become Jehovah's Witnesses, because for them, again, adults who convert, they probably see it as something that can improve their lives. And I can't really blame somebody for wanting to, want to improve their life. So like they say, some former members who have all shared the same experience, but now have different beliefs and approaches to life sometimes get a little bit toxic. Like you can see on the subreddit, when they talk about like Jehovah's Witnesses, like they'll bash it sometimes. But then like they'll bash Christianity in general or religion or having the idea of having a belief, but then they'll kind of forget that there's like a lot of former members who are still Christians. Some of them still believe in the Bible. Some of them have become witches or pagan people. Some of them are still Jehovah's Witnesses out of comfort because they just like it. Like there's the XJW, the thing is not a monolith, but still you'll notice like, a bit of division being created. And I guess that's, again, one of my points is that the Jehovah's Witness culture in general is a very divisive culture. And there are always opportunities to divide people when you're in this culture, and it's easy to take this ideology and keep it into your own life. And I think it's really hard for a former Jehovah's Witness to see active Jehovah's Witnesses as part of the same group, especially like when you have like, the shunning policy. And I think when you see another group as different, even when you come from it, it's hard to acknowledge how much you're actually the same. Like none of us want to say like we want to, especially a lot of us, like we're like really hurt, so we kind of try to distance ourselves as much as we can, but not take the time to say, okay, how am I still like them? And in general, I think this type of mentality is greatly reflected in American culture, because in the US we have the us versus them mentality as well. And I think it's, I would say, a distraction from getting to the real problem or the real issue. Because like, for example, let's take racism in the US, we have this, black versus white, where two groups see themselves as being different because they're having different experiences, have different point of views. But there's also something that they have in common, is that they're both being screwed over by the same government. Because again, there's no reason why a first world democratic country does not have healthcare for all of their citizens, but has a lot of mass shootings that any citizen could fall a victim to. Like, that's nonsense. And you have both groups, and they're kind of, clashing against each other instead of clashing at the source of their pain, the source of their problems, the person that should be fixing it and is not. And I would say likewise with Jehovah's Witnesses and former members, is that the same group is being screwed over by the same group of people, which I would say is the governing body. Because there's no reason that this many people who have good intentions should be forced to not speak with their family members anymore because of beliefs changing, or having, family dynamics and relationships change because people have decided to do something different with their life, or they've disagreed. Because literally, I don't think anyone sincerely wants that to happen, unless they've been brainwashed or like they're disassociating from their experiences. Then yes, I can get it. But I would say that most Jehovah's Witnesses are probably good people. Like, yeah, I would say most of them are good people. So it's not like this is something they have a desire to do, is cut their family members off. Like, internally, that's not something that anyone really wants to do. They do it because they think it's the right thing, but I doubt that a lot of them really want to do it. But also, I was going to say that it makes no sense that a charity that has thousands of sexual abuse cases worldwide is making their current members comply with their practices against their knowledge, but they're still, complying with it. And at the same time, they're actively trying to silence their inactive members from speaking up. And again, you have that same thing. You have like Jehovah's Witnesses for members clashing heads. And really, I think, the problem is the people up at the top who are, putting them against each other. So I guess in summary, just this one aspect of the culture is the us versus the mentality, which is, common for all cults. But one day I just noticed this in my own thoughts, and it was just like living rent-free in my head. So I just wanted to share this in case, this thought is also, or if this thought hasn't come to like the surface of your awareness yet, I just wanted to share that, because I don't know, it kind of helped me put some things in perspective when I realized that, oh, we are the same group, or that, oh, I'm still taking a lot of, I don't know, this mentality that I was raised with, and I'm kind of applying it in my own life without analyzing, where does this come from? And it just shows you that no matter where in the spectrum you come from this culture, that, a little bit of it will always live with you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. For us, it really feels like a bad thing because of the pain. But like, once the pain is like, healed a little bit more, we can kind of look at it a bit more objectively and say, oh, wow, the numbers are crazy, but it's nothing that's abnormal from a human experience. Like, having a governing body be corrupt and doing corrupt things, that's no different than any other governing body around the world, or any other government or political system. Like, everyone is doing the same stuff. They're all cherry picking. They're all creating divisive groups. And I think when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're raised in the way to see yourself as being so different, so that when you leave, you also kind of see yourself as being different as well, without realizing that we're really not that different after all. Okay, I'm ranting too much, I apologize, but this is my second video I wanted to make, so that's all. Bye.